A federal courtroom was supposed to be calm and controlled until Judge Edward Chen insulted Pam Bondi live in front of cameras. But just minutes later, that same judge was in handcuffs, dragged out of his own courtroom by federal officers. What triggered the arrest? What did Bondi reveal? This story has everything: power, pride, and the moment justice fought back. No one in the courtroom expected drama until Judge Edward Chen opened his mouth. It was supposed to be a quiet, straightforward hearing. Legal minds had gathered for a formal session tied to a high-profile ethics investigation. The setting was calm. The media had only sent a few correspondents, expecting a technical day in court. But everything changed the moment Pam Bondi entered the room. Former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was there by subpoena, not to make headlines. She was calm, focused, and undeniably prepared. Carrying a neat folder of documents and her trademark composed demeanor, she was ready to deliver expert testimony that could clarify key facts in the case. For her, it was about duty and truth, not drama. But sitting at the bench was Judge Edward Chen. Known in legal circles for his sharp tongue and firm hand, he had developed a reputation for controlling his courtroom with intensity. Still, no one was prepared for what came next. As Bondi took the stand introducing herself and explaining her role, Judge Chen interrupted before she could even complete her first sentence. "This court doesn't need lectures from politicians," he snapped. His tone wasn't skeptical, it was aggressive. A hush fell over the courtroom. The attorneys on both sides looked up from their notes. Reporters in the back sat straighter. Bondi didn't flinch. She simply took a breath and continued, trying to explain the evidence she had reviewed and why it was relevant. Again, Judge Chen cut her off. "Stick to the facts, Miss Bondi. This isn't a press conference." The remark drew murmurs from the crowd. Legal experts present later said it was one of the most openly hostile tones they'd heard from a judge in years. Bondi, to her credit, didn't rise to the bait. She remained courteous and professional, answering the next question with precision and clarity. But Chen's interruptions continued. Eyewitnesses noted that he rolled his eyes, leaned back in his chair dismissively, and muttered under his breath when Bondi cited legal statutes. At one point, he raised his voice, accusing her of trying to grandstand. The irony, of course, was not lost on anyone. The only grandstanding happening in that courtroom was coming from the bench. By now, the cameras in the room were capturing every second. And across social media, clips would later show Bondi calmly absorbing the verbal jabs, never once losing her cool. The tension in the courtroom was undeniable. Lawyers exchanged awkward glances. A junior aide to one of the investigators quietly took out his phone and started recording, just in case something unprecedented happened. And then it did. Because as Judge Chen raised his voice one final time, slamming his gavel and attempting to silence Bondi yet again, something behind the scenes was already unfolding. Something that would turn the entire hearing upside down and leave the judge facing the unthinkable. No one could have predicted what came next. Instead of focusing on the legal substance of the hearing, Judge Edward Chen shifted into something more disturbing: personal attacks. Rather than addressing the case details or Bondi's testimony, he fixated on her background. "Your record is controversial at best," he said, loudly waving his hand with a tone that sounded more like a political commentator than a federal judge. "You're not here to grandstand." His voice carried across the courtroom with sharp authority, almost like a warning shot. But the warning wasn't about the law. It was aimed directly at Pam Bondi. Bondi calmly responded, trying to clarify her presence. She explained that she wasn't there as a politician, but as a factual witness. She wasn't giving opinions. She was there under subpoena to present documents and clarify the legal procedures she had been involved in. Her demeanor was measured, respectful, and precise. But Judge Chen wasn't interested in explanations. He interrupted again, this time louder, questioning her motives, her experience, even her integrity. And now, the courtroom truly began to shift. Spectators, most of them familiar with courtroom protocol, started whispering among themselves. Journalists looked up from their notepads. A few even raised eyebrows at each other. This wasn't how judges were supposed to behave. Even the attorneys, on both sides, looked uncomfortable. You could feel the awkward tension in the room. Legal observers sitting in the back row, including law clerks and former prosecutors, later described it as one of the most unprofessional displays they had ever witnessed from the bench. Yet Pam Bondi remained composed. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice, and didn't match his aggression. She stood firmly, looked the judge in the eye, and said plainly, "I'm here because I was subpoenaed, and I will speak the truth." That sentence landed with weight. But before anyone could process it, things escalated again. Judge Chen slammed his gavel hard, his voice rising. "Enough!" he shouted. "This is my courtroom!" The words echoed through the chambers like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the room. No one expected that kind of outburst, especially directed at a former attorney general who was testifying under oath. This wasn't a fiery exchange between lawyers. It was a sitting judge attacking a witness in a federal courtroom. Something was deeply wrong. And then came a quiet but critical moment. In the back corner of the room, a young legal aide who had been watching the hearing reached for his phone. Without saying a word, he tapped record. That decision would prove to be one of the most important of the day, because what was happening in that courtroom was no longer just tense. It was potentially unethical, even illegal. The hearing wasn't just going off course, it was about to implode. Within just 15 minutes, the courtroom had completely lost its balance. What began as a routine hearing was now teetering on the edge of full-blown chaos. Pam Bondi, still standing calmly at the witness stand, was presenting documents, papers that pointed to serious misconduct within a powerful government agency. Her voice remained steady, her words were clear, but the more she revealed, the more agitated Judge Edward Chen became. Without warning, he stood up, robes shifting slightly as he gripped his gavel tighter. "We're done here," he barked. "This hearing is adjourned." The sudden declaration stunned the room. Courtroom protocol requires proper closing procedures, especially during testimony under oath. But Judge Chen wasn't following any of them. Then he pointed directly at Bondi. "She's done," he declared, almost shouting. "Get her off the stand." People in the courtroom exchanged looks of disbelief. This wasn't just impatience, it felt like a shutdown. Bondi didn't react. She looked forward, still holding the same documents, refusing to be intimidated. Then came the moment no one expected. A calm but firm voice came from the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, may I approach?" Heads turned. It was the federal oversight attorney, a quiet observer appointed by the Justice Department to ensure impartiality in high-stakes legal proceedings. Up to that point, he had remained completely silent, taking notes, watching carefully. But now, with the hearing unraveling in front of him, he stood from his seat, holding a leather folder. Judge Chen froze, momentarily caught off guard. He paused, hesitated, then motioned him forward. What happened next would flip the entire courtroom upside down. The oversight attorney approached the bench and calmly placed the folder in front of the judge. Without saying a word, he opened it and turned the documents toward Chen. Inside was a compilation of formal ethics complaints, each one filed against Judge Edward Chen in the last 12 months. Some described clear bias, others outlined procedural abuse. But one allegation stood out among the rest like a flashing red warning sign: tampering with evidence in a previous federal case. For a split second, no one moved. The room fell into complete silence. You could hear the clicking of cameras and the scribbling of pens. Reporters leaned forward. Even the court security guards stood motionless, unsure of what would happen next. Chen's face changed. His skin went visibly pale. "This is absurd," he muttered, trying to laugh it off. "You have no authority here." His voice cracked under the pressure, but he attempted to keep his composure. The oversight attorney didn't argue. He simply turned to the courtroom and said, "The Department of Justice is already aware. We've been monitoring this judge for several weeks. Today's conduct only confirms our findings." Gasps erupted. Everyone in the courtroom now understood. They weren't just witnessing a dramatic hearing. They were watching a sitting federal judge being exposed in real time. And things were about to go even further than anyone imagined. Two plainclothes officers moved through the crowd without hesitation. All eyes turned as one of them, a tall man with a calm but commanding voice, stepped forward and addressed the bench directly. "Judge Edward Chen," he said clearly, "we have a federal order to detain you for questioning. Please come with us." For a full second, the courtroom was frozen in time. No one breathed. No one moved. Shock rippled through every row. Even seasoned court reporters, used to witnessing legal tension, sat wide-eyed in disbelief. You could almost hear the collective gasp echo against the courtroom walls. Pam Bondi remained still, standing at the witness stand with the quiet dignity she had maintained since the hearing began. Her expression didn't change. No gloating, no visible satisfaction. Just calm, just professionalism. The very same judge who had belittled and interrupted her minutes earlier, who tried to shut down her testimony, was now being approached by federal authorities. Cameras clicked rapidly, phones shot up, reporters scrambled to tweet the unfolding moment, each one trying to be the first to break the story. On the bench, Judge Chen didn't hide his disbelief. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "You have no right. This is political revenge." But the officers didn't engage with him. They didn't raise their voices. They simply moved forward, reading him his rights in a low tone as one reached for his wrists. Court security didn't intervene. It became obvious that this wasn't some stunt or mistake. It was a coordinated action, planned, legal, and very real. Within seconds, Judge Chen's hands were behind his back. Cuffs clicked into place, and his robe slipped slightly from one shoulder, a visual symbol of everything he was about to lose. His face was a mix of panic and disbelief. He turned back toward the courtroom one last time, perhaps hoping someone would defend him, but no one spoke. His voice echoed faintly as the officers guided him out. "You'll all regret this," he snapped, but the sound of his steps down the hallway quickly drowned out his words. Meanwhile, the courtroom remained silent. Then, Pam Bondi spoke, not to gloat, not to comment on what had just happened, but to do what she came there to do. "I'm ready to continue," she said to the attorneys, her voice steady, "if the court is." Those words hung in the air like a hammer drop. In the midst of legal chaos and public spectacle, Bondi hadn't flinched. She hadn't taken the bait. Instead, she did what few could manage in such a moment. She stayed focused, professional, and in control. Observers later called it a masterclass in courtroom decorum. More than that, it became a symbol that real justice doesn't shout. It stands tall and waits for truth to do the talking. And in that moment, Pam Bondi didn't just win the room. She won the nation's attention. Within just hours of the courtroom incident, the footage had gone viral. Clips taken from phones, news cameras, and live feeds flooded the internet. Titles like "Judge Arrested Mid-Hearing," "Pam Bondi Keeps Her Cool as Courtroom Erupts," and "Legal Shock in Real Time" dominated trending pages. TikTok edits were paired with dramatic music. Twitter exploded with hashtags. News commentators across networks replayed the moment again and again, each time the nation watching with disbelief and curiosity. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear. The public didn't just want spectacle, they wanted answers. Why did Judge Edward Chen erupt the way he did? Why was he so hostile toward Bondi? What exactly was in those documents that prompted federal officers to show up in the middle of a hearing? And how did Pam Bondi stay so calm under pressure when any other witness might have crumbled? By evening, a press gathering formed outside the courthouse. Cameras and microphones lined up as Bondi stepped forward to make a brief statement. She didn't grandstand. She didn't take a victory lap. She spoke clearly, calmly, and with purpose. "I didn't come here to make headlines," she said. "I came here to stand for truth. Judges take an oath to be impartial. When that line is crossed, it's not just about me, it's about justice." Those words, just a few sentences long, spread like wildfire. They were retweeted, quoted, printed on headlines, and even turned into viral soundbites. Social media timelines lit up with support, not just from conservatives or her political allies, but from a wide range of voices, both legal and public. For many, Bondi represented what it meant to face pressure without losing focus, to stand calmly against power and still speak the truth. Legal analysts appeared on national broadcasts calling her testimony measured, professional, and courageous. Commentators praised her for staying collected in a courtroom that had spiraled out of control. Even political opponents found it difficult to deny that Bondi had handled herself with grace in a moment that could have broken most people. Meanwhile, as the world focused on Bondi, Judge Chen's situation was growing more serious by the hour. Though he was released later that evening, sources confirmed that he had been placed under active federal investigation. The Justice Department acknowledged multiple pending ethics inquiries, including alleged bias, prior case misconduct, and the newly surfaced accusation of evidence tampering. If the findings hold, Judge Chen could face disbarment and even criminal charges. But despite the headlines about his downfall, that wasn't the focus for Pam Bondi. When asked if she had anything to say about the judge's arrest, she simply replied, "That's not for me to decide. That's for the system he once represented." And just like that, Bondi reminded everyone that the real story wasn't about personal victory. It was about principle. Because in a courtroom where the rules were bent and justice was nearly silenced, it was her calm voice, steady presence, and refusal to back down that turned the tide. A powerful reminder that no one, not even a judge, is above the law. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this every day.